What if the 10 Commandments are not what you think they are? Most people hear commandments and think of a list of restrictions, a cosmic rulebook, a moral checklist that nobody can keep. And so we either ignore them or we carry them around like a weight on our backs. But a 17th century Puritan pastor named Thomas Watson saw something different when he looked at the Decalogue. He saw a love letter. He saw the character of God written in 10 sentences. And he spent hundreds of pages showing how these ancient words still search our hearts and shape our lives today. Before God gives a single command, he introduces himself. I am the Lord thy God who brought thee out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of bondage. Watson says this preface is everything. God does not begin with demands. He begins with relationship. He says, I am yours and you are mine. Notice the order. God rescued Israel first, then gave them the law. He did not say, keep these rules and I will save you. He said, I have already saved you, now here is how to live as my people. This changes everything. The commandments are not the terms of a contract with a stranger. They are the house rules of a father who has already brought his children home. Obedience flows from gratitude, not from fear. You keep these commands not to earn God's love, but because God's love has already claimed you. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Watson begins where you might not expect. The greatest threat to your worship of the true God, he argues, is not a statue in a temple. It is the invisible idol in your heart. Money can be a god. When your sense of security depends on your bank account more than on divine providence, you are bowing to a golden calf. Pleasure can be a god. When you organize your life around comfort and entertainment, you are building an altar to self-indulgence. Even reputation, career, and family can become gods when they occupy the throne that belongs to the Creator alone. Watson's searching question is this: what do you think about most? What do you fear losing most? What would you refuse to give up even if God asked? Your answer reveals your God. The first commandment does not just prohibit false worship. It commands supreme love. Give God the highest place in your affections, your plans, and your trust. Anything less is idolatry. Thou shalt not make unto thee any graven image. If the first commandment tells us whom to worship, the second tells us how. And Watson is emphatic. We do not get to invent our own approach to God. A graven image is any attempt to bring God down to our level, to make him manageable, to reshape him into something more comfortable. In Watson's day, this meant statues and icons. In ours, it means something subtler. We craft a mental image of God that suits us, a God who never judges, a God who never demands holiness, a God who looks suspiciously like our own preferences reflected back at us. Watson calls this spiritual image-making. When you strip away the attributes of God that make you uncomfortable, you are carving an idol just as surely as if you chiseled stone. True worship means coming to God on his terms, as he has revealed himself in Scripture, not as we wish he would be. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. This commandment is wider than you think. Yes, it forbids casual swearing, but Watson shows it reaches into every corner of your life. God's name represents his character, his reputation, his honor. You take it in vain whenever you profess faith but live as if God does not matter. Whenever you pray words you do not mean. Whenever you make promises in God's name and break them. Whenever you use religion as a mask for selfish ambition. Watson says the positive duty here is comprehensive reverence. Speak of God with awe. Worship with sincerity. Let your daily conduct honor the name you carry as a believer. Every careless word, every hollow prayer, every gap between your profession and your practice takes the name of God in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Watson calls the Sabbath the market day of the soul. It is the day when heaven comes near, when ordinary time is interrupted by sacred time. And Watson insists this is not a burden but a gift. God rested on the seventh day not because he was tired, but to establish a rhythm for human flourishing. You were not made for endless labor. You were made for work and rest, service and worship, giving and receiving. Watson's vision of Sabbath keeping is far from grim. He describes it as a day of delight. Delight in worship, in fellowship, in reflection, in the unhurried presence of God. The Sabbath is a weekly rehearsal for eternity, a foretaste of the everlasting rest that awaits. When you set aside one day to worship and rest, you declare that your productivity is not your identity. God is. Honor thy father and thy mother. Watson takes this far beyond childhood obedience. Every relationship of authority in society is gathered under this commandment. Parents and children, yes, but also employers and workers, teachers and students, rulers and citizens, pastors and congregations. Honor means more than mere compliance. It means respect, gratitude, and genuine care. Children honor parents not just by obeying, but by providing for them in old age. Citizens honor rulers by praying for them even when disagreeing with them. Workers honor employers by serving faithfully even when no one is watching. And Watson does not let authority off the hook. The commandment implies duty in both directions. Those in authority must govern with justice, gentleness, and self-sacrifice. A parent who provokes, a ruler who oppresses, a master who exploits, all violate the spirit of this command. The fifth commandment is the foundation of a well-ordered society. Pull this thread and everything unravels. Thou shalt not kill. Watson follows Jesus in driving this commandment straight into the human heart. Murder begins long before anyone picks up a weapon. Unjust anger is a kind of murder, for it wishes destruction on another person in the chambers of the mind. Malice is murder nursed in silence. Envy is murder dressed in respectability. Even neglecting someone in desperate need, Watson argues, violates this command, for you are withholding the help that could preserve life. And here Watson adds something startling. The sixth commandment also forbids self-destruction. Reckless living, neglect of your own health, despair that abandons hope. Your life belongs to God, you are not your own. Caring for yourself is not selfishness, it is stewardship. The positive duty, preserve life, seek reconciliation, show mercy. Be an agent of peace wherever anger and violence threaten. Thou shalt not commit adultery. Watson treats this commandment with characteristic thoroughness. Purity, he insists, begins in the eyes and the imagination long before it involves the body. A lustful glance is adultery in seed form. A fantasy entertained is adultery of the heart. Watson warns that sin always follows a progression. First the eyes wander, then the thoughts linger, then the will consents, then the body acts. Guard the first step and you will never reach the last. But Watson is no mere prohibitionist. The positive duty under the seventh commandment is the cultivation of faithful love. Marital devotion, tender affection, loyalty that endures hardship. Purity is not the absence of passion. It is passion directed rightly, love channeled within the boundaries God designed for its flourishing. Thou shalt not steal. Watson catalogs more forms of theft than you might imagine. Overcharging, underpaying, defrauding, borrowing without returning, withholding what you owe, and even wasting time that belongs to your employer. But the deeper principle is this. God is the ultimate owner of everything. You are a steward, not a proprietor. Every act of theft declares that you trust your own cunning more than God's provision. The positive duty is twofold. First, justice. Give everyone exactly what you owe them, no shortcuts, no evasions. Second, generosity. Share freely from what God has entrusted to you. Watson argues that contentment is the death of stealing. For when you truly believe God will provide what you need, you lose all motivation to take what belongs to someone else. Thou shalt not bear false witness. Watson expands this commandment into a sweeping call for truth in every area of life. Lying under oath, yes, but also gossip, slander, flattery, exaggeration, broken promises, and deliberate silence when truth needs to be spoken. Every human being, Watson says, bears the image of God. When you destroy someone's reputation with a false word, you assault the image of the Creator in that person. A good name, once ruined, is almost impossible to restore. The positive duty is a life of transparent honesty. Speak truth even when it costs you. Defend the reputation of others when they are not present to defend themselves. Let your yes be yes and your no be no. In a world drowning in spin and deception, truthfulness is itself a kind of worship. Thou shalt not covet. Watson saves this commandment for last because it goes deepest. Every other commandment addresses actions or words. This one reaches into desire itself. Coveting is wanting what God has given to someone else. It is looking at your neighbor's life and feeling that God has shortchanged you. And Watson shows that coveting is the root from which every other sin grows. Why do people steal? Because they coveted. Why do they lie? Because they coveted. Why do they kill? Because they coveted something so badly they would destroy to get it. The antidote to coveting is contentment, not passive resignation, but an active, joyful trust that God has given you exactly what you need for this season of your life. Contentment does not mean wanting nothing. It means wanting God more than anything else. Thomas Watson saw in the 10 Commandments 2 things at once. First, a mirror. When you hold the law up to your life, you see how far you fall short. No one keeps these commandments perfectly. Not in action, not in word, and certainly not in thought. The law humbles every one of us and drives us to Christ, the only one who kept every commandment without failure. But second, a road. The commandments are not just there to condemn you. They are a guide for the life you were made to live. A life of true worship, honest speech, faithful love, generous justice, and deep contentment. Not a life of grim duty, but a life of freedom. For the person who loves God with all their heart finds that his commandments are not burdensome. Watson spent his life showing that obedience and joy are not opposites. They are the same thing, viewed from different angles. To obey God is to come home to who you were always meant to be. The 10 Commandments are not a cage. They are a map to the fullest life imaginable.